Coming up on Arirang News, North Korea cuts off all of its communication lines with South Korea, saying it'll now regard the South as an enemy, apparent retaliation for the leaflets denouncing the regime regularly sent over the border by South Korean civilians. The de facto head of Samsung Electronics, Lee Jae-yong, is staying out of jail for now after a Seoul court declined to issue a warrant for his arrest in connection with allegations regarding his succession to the company's leadership. And the rally in stocks continues. On Wall Street, the NASDAQ at a record high and the S&P now positive for the year. The Korean markets are up too. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. As of noon today, North Korea has closed all communication lines with South Korea, something it warned last week it would do because of the anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaigns by South Korean civilians. Also, the North says it'll consider South Korea its enemy from now on. The South Korean government's saying that communication channels should be maintained, however, in accordance with the two sides' agreements. Oh Jung-hee files this report from Seoul's Unification Ministry.
Starting noon Tuesday, North Korea has cut off all its communication lines with South Korea as a protest against balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang propaganda material launched from south of the border. Early on Tuesday, Pyongyang's Korean Central News Agency reported that the North would shut down the interKorean hotlines at the Joint Liaison Office between the militaries and the one it has with Seoul's presidential office. It explained that this is only the first stage of its actions to get rid of contact points with the South and said the regime's work towards South Korea will be turned into work towards an enemy. After Pyongyang's warnings, Seoul tried communicating with Pyongyang using all the hotlines it has, including the ones at the Joint Liaison Office and the military ones, but the North did not respond. South Korea says that the hotlines will have to be maintained in accordance with interKorean agreements as they're the basic tools for communication. Regarding the North calling Seoul an enemy, South Korea did not have anything to say. The North's latest action comes as it's been blaming Seoul for failing to stop defectors from sending anti-Pyongyang propaganda leaflets across the border. Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, issued a statement last week warning that Pyongyang could demolish the Kaesong industrial complex, close down the Joint Liaison Office, and scrap the inter-Korea military agreement.
The government is reviewing effective ways to fundamentally eradicate acts that could raise tensions at the border area. We are preparing for a legislature.
But even after South Korea promised it would find a way to stop the balloons, the North warned Tuesday that cutting the hotlines is only the first stage of its actions. This means there could be additional moves from north of the border that could raise tensions on the Korean peninsula. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Samsung Group's de facto leader and heir apparent Lee Jae-yong has avoided another stint in jail after the Seoul Central District Court refused the prosecution's request to issue a warrant for his arrest on allegations related to his leadership succession plans. Kim Bo-young reports.
After a marathon court hearing, the top executive at Samsung Electronics, Lee Jae-yong, was able to walk out of Seoul Detention Center, located south of the capital at 2:40 a.m. Korea time on Tuesday, after the court refused to issue an arrest warrant for him. The court said it couldn't find sufficient probable cause to arrest the billionaire business tycoon over allegations related to the controversial 2015 merger of two Samsung affiliates. Two former Samsung executives who were brought in with Lee Jae-yong and Kim Jong-jung from the group's now deactivated control tower, the Future Strategy Office, were also released. The prosecution said it was disappointed with the court's ruling. They are expected to review the reasons behind their failure to convince the court to issue the warrant. They will decide whether to request another arrest warrant for Lee, but it is expected to be tough as it has already been denied by the court. The refusal to issue an arrest warrant affects an external committee's decision as well. Lee previously requested the establishment of a citizen panel around a week ago before prosecutors asked for the arrest warrant to judge if the investigation regarding his charges is even necessary. Although he managed to avoid arrest this time, Some experts say it is time for Lee to overcome his repeated owner risk, namely the misconduct of conglomerate owners that pose a threat to the company's stock prices, profits, and its future plans to fulfill his personal ambitions. Prosecutors could still indict Lee after collecting more evidence and convict him through trials. Making matters worse, Lee is still dealing with an old bribery case ordered to be retried by the Supreme Court. For Lee to recreate a new Samsung like he mentioned in his rare public apology last month and fulfill his ambitions of making Samsung the world's #1 system semiconductor maker by 2030, it seems Lee needs to first overcome his legal problems before they can become a reality. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
New York City, the epicenter of the pandemic in the U.S., entered phase 1 of a 4-phase reopening plan on Monday. And on Wall Street, the NASDAQ closed at an all-time high, while the S&P 500 is now in positive territory for the year on hopes for a swift economic recovery. Our Kim Jae-hee has this report.
New York City was officially back in business on Monday, exactly 100 days after the city's first COVID-19 case was confirmed. The first phase of its 4-phase reopening plan allowed some 400,000 workers to resume their jobs at some 32,000 construction sites, wholesale and manufacturing centers, and retail sites in the city. The mayor of New York welcomed the reopening.
Day 100 of the coronavirus crisis, and it is the day that we start to liberate ourselves from this disease, the day we move forward. Phase 1 of the restart begins today in New York City.
At the same time, he cautioned against the city letting its guard down, saying that could risk all the progress made so far. U.S. stocks soared on Monday amid expectations from investors that the U.S. economy was on the road to recovery. The tech-heavy NASDAQ posted a new all-time closing record on Monday after adding over 1.1%. The Dow Jones was up 1.7%, and the S&P 500 rose 1.2%, fully recovering from the losses caused by COVID-19. An investment expert said the gains were on the back of hopes of an economic recovery and faith that the Federal Reserve will keep making moves that benefit the market.
Today's market action was 3 main things. A follow-through from the enthusiasm of last Friday. B, a bet that the Fed will continue to hammer rates down and to buy almost any security except equity securities, which make equity securities go up in price. And third, the most probable direction for stocks on any day is the direction from the prior day.
While some experts forecast stocks to continue on an upward trajectory, others have cautioned that the rise could be short-term as uncertainty still lingers. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me today.
As we just heard, stocks in the U.S. continue to rally, the S&P in positive territory now for the year. What's going on Wall Street and the global markets?
Yes. As you said, on Monday, Dow Jones surged 462 points, or 1.7%, to 27,000 plus. And the S&P 500 climbed another 39 points, or 1.2%. Also, NASDAQ was up by another 1.1%, hitting 9925, a historical close of highest ever. However, though, today, if you look at the U.S. stock index futures, it is edging lower, pointing to modest losses as investors trying to digest the strong rally in the previous session. The reason for the strong rally that we saw yesterday is because the hope for economic recovery that seems to be coming through quite nicely. And the Federal Reserve moved to expand the scope of its Main Street lending program by lowering the minimum loan size to $250,000 and extending the loan terms to 5 years. So clearly, there's a huge support by the central bank affecting continuous rise of the overall equity market. Right now, though, on a fundamental basis, U.S. market, particularly on the S&P side, seems to be fairly reasonably valued at this point in time. So we might need take a breather time, even though that liquidity is record high level where the M2 growth rate is over 23%. So we need to watch out for the next few days how much of the losses that we might see from the equity market or how long it might last in terms of the taking breather time or in the future.
Well, the rally continues in Korea as well. Day 7, I believe, of the rally now. Tell us about the Korean markets.
Right. Even though the Korean markets continue to do rise for the last 2 days, in terms of the movement, it's not that positive. If you look at yesterday, it went up as high as 1.6%, breaking well above 2,200 level, but it closed at only a 0.1% rise and closing below 2,200. And that happened today again. When it started, it was very strong, and it broke above 2,200 level, but it fell as much as 0.84%, and it closed at below 2,200 level again. Obviously, continuation of concern about the overall economic condition and the COVID-19 issues, and maybe the valuation might be looking expensive on global scale. People are concerned about the Korean market at this point in time. However, though, we think that the overall valuations for Korea seems to be still very cheap, and that the foreign investors' net selling should be reasonably stopping at this point in time. And the Korean won seems to be fairly stable at 1,200 range, which is quite positive for foreign investors' investment trend. So all in all, there's a concern about the correction because of the strong rise that we saw from both KOSPI and KOSDAQ. But other than that, we think that the taking breather time or the taking somewhat of a losses in the future, it's not going to be that strong. And also, if the earnings comes through for the second quarter and third quarter, then it will have another momentum to rise further. In any case, right now, we might need to take some resting time for the equity market.
Well, now the Fed's Open Market Committee is meeting this Tuesday and Wednesday. We should get some idea about where policy goes from here. What do you expect to hear from the Fed?
Sure. I think we need to watch out for how long this zero rate will last, and also the economic projection, how strong the recovery can come through in how long period. And also, market seems to be trying to get some clues to how Fed would respond to inflation if it actually comes through, and if the inflation rises quicker than expected with such high level liquidity injection that we saw in the last couple of months. Clearly, 23% plus of the M2 growth rate is extremely high. That is about twice higher than what we saw in the 2008 cycle. So too much ample liquidity might relate to lead to inflation numbers coming through at much higher pace. If that's the case, then the contraction of liquidity could happen quicker than expected. So we need to watch out how aggressive the inflation number might be coming through and how aggressive the Fed will decide on in terms of the interest rate environment. So some people might say that the Fed needs to do negative interest rate, but I don't think that that's necessary at this point in time. And we just need to see how long this zero rate can last and how long this liquidity injection can last.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Now, the historic dip in stocks earlier this year has drawn in a lot of new individual investors in Korea who saw it as an opportunity. Jaeyong has more.
Beginner investor Lee Jae-yong has become more interested in the stock market since the onset of the outbreak.
I've been living off my income, but the outbreak has made me feel very insecure about my job, so I realized the importance of investing and having financial knowledge.
With more individual investors coming in, the country's benchmark KOSPI index is close to erasing its year-to-date losses, jumping about 50% from its March low as of Tuesday. Fueled by a recent market bull run, outstanding margin loans, which investors take out to buy stocks, have exceeded $9 billion, indicating investor hopes for price gains down the road. And people are also looking to learn more about investing well.
YouTubers who share their own financial strategies and advice, including on how to invest in stocks, have quickly gained traction among individual investors looking for tips.
Well-known finance expert John Lee, who shares his investment tips on YouTube, says people are investing more during the outbreak based on what they learned from previous crises.
Most people who bought the stocks at the time make money. When you invest, you buy low, sell high. So in this kind of crisis happens, share price is down. So we take opportunities.
However, he emphasized that what's really important is not the timing, but to invest for the long term. And mobile apps that help customers invest are also seeing a boom. Digital investment management app service AIM has grown roughly 17-fold on year as more people look to avoid face-to-face contact amid the outbreak.
The mobile app systematically manages customers' assets with a set of algorithms very similar to those used by the world's top 1% of institutional investors.
AIM CEO added that more people investing in the stock market is a good trend, saying that it is difficult to build wealth just through income from labor alone. Jaeyong, Arirang News.
Now, the pandemic may have dealt a blow to sales of conventional cars, but South Korea's two biggest automakers, Hyundai and Kia, have seen major growth this year in their exports of electric vehicles. Combined, in the first 5 months of this year, they shipped more than 40,000 units, which is an increase on year of almost 58%. In the month of May, they were more than double the amount a year earlier, at a little over 11,000 units. And in terms of value, those shipments were up 69% to almost $400 million US. These electric vehicles are being shipped mainly to Europe, where environmental regulations are tighter. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.